what we're really trying to do is to bring better knowledge to produce better medicine. And it's really as simple as that. Now, what is that better knowledge? Well, it's composed of really producing better actionable information. And how do we go about that? Well, we use a better math.
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Jim Weisman, CEO of Ingine, exploring deep into the intersection of artificial intelligence and healthcare. In our world where healthcare costs are soaring and drug development timelines stretch into decades, Ingine is revolutionizing how we can analyze complex medical and healthcare data to produce better knowledge to create better medicine. By leveraging quantum mechanic principles and advanced probabilistic mathematics, they're tackling some of healthcare's most pressing challenges, from drug discovery to personalized medicine. Co-founded by Dr. Barry Robson, a former chief science officer at IBM's Global Life Sciences division, Ingine is on a mission to unlock the full potential of that life sciences data. Jim brings over 3 decades of experience in healthcare and management to Ingine, building on an educational foundation from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management. His extensive experience includes leadership roles at BioEnterprise and HealthSync, strategic consulting for major financial institutions, and roles at organizations like OrthoBrain, which we have featured here on Lay of the Land back on episode 56, in addition to his service as president of the Ohio Venture Association, where he led the effort to establish Venture Ohio, a statewide venture capital association. This was an insightful and reflective conversation. We explored Jim's journey, the pioneering technology and mathematics driving Ingine, transitioning from concept and academia to reality, the challenges of building a deep technology company in Cleveland, learnings from the market, and ultimately Ingine's vision for the future of personalized medicine. So with that, please enjoy my conversation with Jim Weisman after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by John Carroll University's Boler College of Business, widely recognized as one of the top business schools in the region. As we've heard time and time again from entrepreneurs here on Lay of the Land, many of whom are proud alumni of John Carroll University, success in this ever-changing world of business requires a dynamic and innovative mindset, deep understanding of emerging technologies and systems, strong ethics, leadership prowess, acute business acumen, all qualities nurtured through the Boler College of Business. With 4 different MBA programs of study spanning professional, online, hybrid, and 1-year flexible, the Boler College of Business provides flexible timelines and various class structures for each MBA track, including online, in-person, hybrid, and asynchronous, all to offer the most effective options for you, including the ability to participate in an elective international study tour, providing unparalleled opportunities to expand your global business knowledge by networking with local companies overseas and experiencing a new culture. The career impact of a Boler MBA is formative and will help prepare you for this future of business and get more out of your career. To learn more about John Carroll University's Boler MBA programs, please go to business.jcu.edu. The Boler College of Business is fully accredited by AACSB International, the highest accreditation a college of business can have. Well, Jim, thank you for joining us here on the podcast today.
You're welcome, Jeffrey.
So you have been in and around Cleveland and Ohio entrepreneurship for your career, from supporting institutions to venture capital to startups to running Ingine today. I wanted to start with how you thought about what the thread is that ties your career together and what really kind of drew you to entrepreneurship originally.
I think if you had to pick one thing that sort of serves as the thread, it would be sort of this discovery gene in me, which really I think relates to just sort of being in awe of the things that other people have done and the things that are out there that we haven't figured out yet or are still discovering. And so those new things, those novel things always excited me and always attracted me. And because of that, I think that's drawn me towards the entrepreneurial side of business. And even though I had my got my feet wet in large corporations and in the big city, I really enjoy kind of working in the smaller environments of startups and working with entrepreneurs who have great vision.
How would you outline your path to Ingine? How is it that it converged at this opportunity?
Yeah, I would have to say it's probably the most convoluted path you're going to find. So, coming out of an undergraduate education where my focus was on finance and then working in, as I mentioned, sort of large corporate environments. I started with a small consulting firm, but moved on to PepsiCo and Macy's and more operational roles and strategy roles. And then even from there, switched gears, moved into a family business and didn't find my way into the entrepreneurial scene for well over a decade. So it probably isn't something that you could trace and say, that makes sense. But at the end of the day, the experience that I gained working in all those different environments with all those different individuals, and even learning from some of the leaders of these large corporations who had an entrepreneurial bent, sort of directed me towards what eventually became involvement with a startup. And then from there, it's just sort of stayed somewhat steady state into that environment.
So what one specific, chapter of that journey that I wanted to ask about was your time with the, Ohio Venture Association and, really being on the flip side of the coin of a lot of entrepreneurship from the investing perspective. What kind of lessons you observed or picked up on from your time there and what you're carrying with you as and in application to the work you're doing as an entrepreneur now?
My involvement on the board of the Ohio Venture Association really came about because both the desire to learn more about venture and also just my involvement with startups. So I think initially the membership there kind of paralleled when I joined HealthSync, which was the first startup that I was involved with. And it was just sort of a way of enhancing my network, learning about venture and startups. And, it blossomed from there. And that involvement with the OVA paralleled sort of my involvement then with startups, with venture capital, with bioenterprise, which was more of an advisory role to startups, and then back into a startup itself, taking on more of a leadership position.
So in a sentence, there's a way to describe Ingine as you've related, as this novel platform using adapted Dirac algebra notation, information theory, and Bayesian inference for faster, less expensive, more accurate predictive analytics for life sciences and health and human health. And I wanted to frame, what we're going to discuss today in a bit of a Richard Feynman framing of things, given the complexity of what is in that sentence and kind of the esoteric fields involved. So Feynman was kind of famous for many things as a theoretical physicist, but I always think about him as the master of explaining, complex topics in a simple way with simple language. And so I wanted to kind of start with that in mind, reading back that sentence of what Ingine does is there's a lot of complexity there. So help us set the stage for what Ingine is all about and your path to it and ultimately what you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And actually, I'm glad you pointed out the complexity of what that statement was, because that actually was one of the first things I wrestled with. And I still wrestle with on this. And part of it is it's not an easy thing to just break down. And you're coming from some of the highest levels of complexity that man has ever discovered. And that's, quantum mechanics and the nature of that and the work that brilliant minds did over 100 years ago, Paul Dirac and the like. And so the best way, I think, to maybe simplify that, maybe take a Feynman approach, is to say, okay, what we're really trying to do is to bring better knowledge to produce better medicine. And it's really as simple as that. Now, what is that better knowledge? Well, it's composed of really producing better actionable information. And how do we go about that? Well, we use a better math. And, a lot of people argue about what better math might be, but we go back to, again, 100 years ago, and the brilliant minds who had to tackle the thing known as quantum mechanics and understand how to work with it. And up until Paul Dirac and his Dirac notation in algebra, it was a struggle. And Dirac somehow was able to tame that field and give us the tools that allowed us to do all the great work that was done in quantum mechanics from then through today. And Dirac himself said, I believe that this mathematics and notation, this algebra and notation, is actually usable for all human endeavors beyond just what he's using it for. He further said he believes that a really good sign of a truly good notation and algebra is that it forces you to include the right information and doesn't allow you to include the wrong information. And so fortunately, I was able to team up with an individual who understood that, because I really probably wouldn't have understood what he meant, but an individual who understood it and tried to take that and take what Dirac had said and take what Dirac had done and figure out, how do you apply that to things outside of quantum mechanics? How do you apply that to things like the field of medicine? And so again, you can say that long, convoluted statement about what we're doing with Dirac notation and algebra and quantum mechanics and all the complexity there. But at the end of the day, we're taking the data that exists, we're turning it into actionable information, which is really the basis of knowledge. So we're producing better knowledge. And at the end of the day, with better knowledge, you can generate better medicine. Now, what can you do in the sense of what is better medicine? Well, it's better applications in the clinical environment. How do you make decisions better? How do you understand healthcare better? It goes into areas like insurance. How do you produce the most value for what you're paying for? It goes into discovery, drug development, the life sciences side of the equation. How do you tackle all the complexity that comes with trying to figure out cures for cancer or diagnostics for cancer or rare diseases or just, major diseases that we still haven't been able to really tackle? And that's really what we're trying to accomplish, is we're saying, look, we're not going to understand everything here, but we're going to give you guys a tool that will let you produce better knowledge. And because of that, you will produce better medicine.
That is a much more simple way of thinking about it.
Okay.
It's a broad framing, for Ingine, better knowledge for better medicine. Where did that come from?
Look, that came from a lot of back and forth between myself, the founders, and other individuals who've been either advising us or hearing us out over the years. Our original story was a complex one, and we talked very much about, all this Dirac notation and quantum universal exchange language and all these other components that we had and the types of things it could do. And, we understood and we heard from them that, look, it's just too complicated. I can't understand what's going on. And over time, we were able to boil that down. Now, it took way too long in my mind. I wish I had a better marketing mind that I could have maybe come to that a little sooner. But we finally really said, okay, this is what resonates. This is what we can explain things to people in a simpler manner. And hopefully that will give them the clarity to really kind of understand. The other thing is we got lost along the way on our path in the AI revolution that sort of swept up around us. And, sometimes you get lost in the woods and you don't see the trees. And so we kind of got swept up a little bit. We wanted to make sure that people understood, where we stood vis-a-vis other AI technologies. And so we tried to communicate in the language of AI. And really, I think that maybe confused our story for too long. So now we're really trying to reclaim our story, reclaim our identity. And that's, where we've been able to finally come out with a simplification that we think people can understand.
Right. So you had mentioned this analogy of, kind of the forest through the trees and getting lost in the AI, zeitgeist we've gone through in the last few years. One thing that I know many founders struggle with is technology for technology's sake, or grounding it in, what is the problem we are trying to solve? And so it sounds like, there was both a recognition of the impact and significance of a certain mathematical and technological, development on one side of it. I'm curious how you tried to ground what you saw as the potential of this technology in a specific set of problems that you're ultimately trying to solve.
Yeah. So that's actually a really interesting question because it brings in sort of the concept of, things change and we're not in a static environment. So
Yep.
when the two co-founders, when Barry Robson, who's the originator of the technology, started thinking about this, it was the kind of early 2000s, and you just had a call from the president's council to try to create interoperability in healthcare and better clinical decision support, evidence-based medicine. And so he had been playing around with this technology and he said, look, I can build out a better system to specifically address all of those problems, all of those needs. And so that was his initial focus, was
Yeah.
really how do we respond to interoperability? How do we create evidence-based medicine that people can use? And for many years, he was finishing up the technology, building that out, really focusing on that. And then he found his co-founder, Srinidhi Bore, who had a very similar, insight into what was needed in healthcare and where they could go with the technology. And so that's what they launched as. They really launched as a solution to interoperability and a solution to delivering evidence-based medicine, clinical decision support backed by good information, good knowledge. Unfortunately, when they came out, there was a lot of sort of pushback on new technology for interoperability. The existing standards wanted to maintain their position. And then when you started looking at the clinical decision support side of this, they hit basically the year 2000 COVID challenge, which basically threw all hospitals into a downward spiral financially, and then also kind of changed the way that they were looking at bringing in new ideas and concepts and technologies. So they went from an entity, we went from an entity that was prepared to address evidence-based medicine, help with clinical decision support, help with interoperability of healthcare records and information around the world, to an environment that had been receptive to that a decade before, but now was not receptive. So this temporal change really kind of threw them from where they were going to be able to take the technology. And it took us a couple of years to sort of change gears, learn from the market what was going on, and shift where we were focusing. Now, we had to make sure we could shift. So we had to do some of our own internal reviews and assessments. We had actually some proof of concept projects that we undertook, which we had done prior proof of concept projects, but they were focused in that interoperability and clinical decision support area. So we were able to finally make that transition and come out of it. And for the last probably now 12 months, we've been able to really focus more on how we bring this to the life sciences as a better knowledge for better medicine solution. At the same time, Barry was sort of leading edge on AI. He had been involved with AI since the 70s, and he was ahead of the game until he wasn't ahead of the game. And that's more of not so much the technology side, but a marketing side. So when they started to see some of these breakthroughs in AI and neural nets and deep learning and machine learning, and then also on the GPT side, those stories started clouding the market and clouding people's understanding of what was good math and good technology versus what was promised and promoted. And so we ended up hitting that little tsunami, and the combination of the tsunami of AI, which is starting to filter out and come back to the ground, and the changes in what was going on in healthcare, you sort of had your own miniature superstorm Sandy, which hit this region in 2012. Well, that's kind of what hit us. And so we've spent some time trying to recover from that. We had to sort of think about, how do you deal with, tech for tech's sake, where we thought our tech was the greatest thing to deal with the problem, but now the problem has changed. So now, do you still have the best tech, and how do you transform your technology to be appropriately addressing the problem that you feel you really can address and is still needed to be addressed? So we've kind of had to deal with that, and we've learned along the way, and we've learned a lot about that. And again, it's one of these things where you kind of wish you knew beforehand what was going to happen, because you probably would have not stepped in the muck, if you could have known to avoid it.
Yeah. So AI is used somewhat loosely as a term today. in its application of, basically in the way every company is a technology company, it seems like every company is an AI company, but there is a very explicit and specific way in which, you have thought about and an application are using it. And so I'd love to hear, what is the actual AI that, you are employing within Ingine, and how is it different from other, traditional AI models, and what is, happened in more recent times, and what specifically does it allow for you to do as an organization, and why is it critical in the way that you are using it?
Yeah. So let me kind of tell you my definition of what people consider AI, just so I can make sure I'm on the same page as you and others. If you go back to the 1950s, you have the first development of the perceptron. And that sort of is the genesis of the initial AI revolution, or AI. And it's had its ups and downs over the years. But basically, you're looking at a concept of an attempt to mimic a neuron and mimic the brain. And if we add millions and millions of these neurons together and do math on them, we can recreate the capabilities of the brain, which means we'll recreate the ability of a human being. And that'll be artificial intelligence. And so that has kind of exploded over the years. Some, advancements that people made. Backpropagation was probably the biggest advancement that really changed the nature of that. And then the ability to scale. So now all of a sudden, the limitations of memory and of throughput no longer were the constraints that were holding back these analytic capabilities that people were building. That to me is what people think about or know of as AI. And even when you think about neural nets and you compare them to a GPT is really built on neural nets. It just breaks apart the information differently and then reconstructs it differently. But at the end of the day, you're basically doing regression analysis. I hate to say it. It's just very complex regression analysis, nonlinear, and a lot of calculations. Barry looked at that and basically said, that's interesting. Now you have to remember, he was at IBM at the time that they were developing Watson. Barry was in the chief science officer role for their entire global healthcare, life sciences, and pharma division. He himself had come out of the Watson Research Center, and again had a background in developing some of the early advances in information technology prior to his days at IBM. But he looked at all of what was going on and said, you know what, guys, this really isn't going to get you far. There are limitations on what is being done here. You need to go back and look at this from an information theoretic perspective. You have some brilliant people over the last 60, 70, 80 years who have come up with some very important discoveries in information theory, including Barry himself. And you have to couple that, as we stated earlier, with a better math. And you're dealing with complex systems. And complex systems are not deterministic, or you're rarely going to find a complex system that's deterministic, maybe a Rube Goldberg machine. You really have to think about this from a probabilistic perspective. So you have to find a probabilistic math that you can work with, and you have to find information theoretic concepts that you can build into that to allow you to do better math and produce better knowledge. And so Barry really stepped back and built his AI, and we still use the term AI because we are doing similar things in terms of prediction and classification and the like.
Yeah.
But we built it on a completely different foundation and a completely different set of principles. One of the key principles is the belief that we have to have this as a glass box. We cannot have these with hidden layers and black box calculations and random weights that no one really understands how they're derived or where they came from or what they do. We had to have this built in a manner that's completely open, accessible, reviewable, understandable. And that's what Barry again set out to do. Now, fortunately, the use of the Dirac notation in algebra allows us to do that. Fortunately, Barry's concepts of information theory that are built in are easily understood. And so we can produce that glass box AI that others can't. Now, the challenge then is, how do you communicate that to everyone, and how do you get them to understand? And there are very few people in the world who can grasp all of these concepts. And we see that even with AI. There's a few people looked to as the gurus of AI, and they'll believe whatever they say, Jeff Hinton and Juan LeCun. Well, who's going to argue for the other side of the equation? Who's going to argue for the other information theoretic capabilities and measures that are brought into our AI? And that's where we have some of the challenge of communication.
Mm. Well, I always think about it in very few people understand how the microwave works, but we can put the frozen dinner in there and 30 seconds later it comes out cooked. And ultimately, people don't really care about the technology as much as they care that it solves, a certain problem for them.
But Jeff, you bring up an interesting point there. So, the first microwaves didn't come around in the 80s and 90s with you and I growing up, or 2000s. The first microwaves came around in the 50s, and people were scared to death of them and would not have them in their house for anything because they feared, well, right. That's nuclear, or we're gonna come out with this, some sort of mutations after using it. So the commercial applications were really the first uses of some of that technology, and it took a long time for people to understand the technology, get comfortable with it, and finally bring it into their home environment in a manner that they could understand and use. So it's interesting looking back. The perspective is one of, well, hey, people use complex things like microwave and maybe they don't fully understand it, but it didn't happen overnight. And that's part of our challenge is how do we speed up that process? How do we get into the market and convince people and educate them enough so that we don't have to take 5 decades to become the standard or household, usable technology?
Right. And at the highest level, I can understand without fully understanding how it works. Better math could lead to better knowledge, could lead to better medicine. Lay of the Land is brought to you by Impact Architects and by 90. As we share the stories of entrepreneurs building incredible organizations in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio, Impact Architects has helped hundreds of those leaders, many of whom we have heard from as guests on this very podcast, realize their own visions and build these great organizations. I believe in Impact Architects and the people behind it so much that I have actually joined them personally in their mission to help leaders gain focus, align together, and thrive by doing what they love. If you too are trying to build great, Impact Architects is offering to sit down with you for a free consultation or provide a free trial through 90, the software platform that helps teams build great companies. If you are interested in learning more about partnering with Impact Architects or by leveraging 90 to power your own business, please go to ia.layoftheland.fm. The link will also be in our show notes. You mentioned, more recently it's begun to resonate. How would you describe as what the big break was, and where, Ingine is today, and kind of grounded in a bit of, practically what does this look like in the real world?
Yeah.
And
I'll be honest. Yeah, I'll be honest. We're still looking for that big break. We're talking with some organizations right now, and we think these are the organizations who have the ability to understand what we're doing and help us bring this technology forward in the right manner. So, we're all working diligently that within a very short period of time, we will get that kind of big break and get this moving forward. But it has been a challenge.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make it sound like it just happens overnight easily. And the phrase, better knowledge equals better medicine is something that just all of a sudden flips the switch. We still have to get in there and somewhat educate them. We've been very fortunate that a couple of high-level individuals are helping us in an advisory role, and one of the individuals really understands what we're doing, and so he's been able to help us get the right connections and really start to move this forward a little bit in the way we need to.
What are you working on right now? And what is the broader vision and goal for Ingine today? So
we've really, as I said, about a year ago, really started rethinking and focusing in the life sciences and understanding where our applications could be in the life sciences. And we did some POC work where we showed there's some real basic market segmentation or patient segmentation capabilities. We can support the real world evidence, real world data derived information we can pull out of large data sets that can help pharma companies with existing assets But we've also started understanding that we can apply our technology to the drug discovery process from its earlier stages. We can analyze chemical composition and help entities narrow down the number of compounds that they want to move forward to their computational chemist, and from there. Barry has even done some work in protein folding and the understanding of what we could add to the insights gain, for protein folding and what that could mean. Recently, we actually started looking at some genomic information and the types of things that we can do that would help understand cancers better and understand the breakdowns of which genes are interacting and how they're probabilistically leading to a certain type of cancer or another type of cancer. So we're kind of a little bit in a discovery mode, but at the same time, we've already shown some capabilities in this space, and we'd like to advance those capabilities, but also work with others to explore where else this foundational platform capability can be expanded.
Provide additional contrast for, the actual problem. What does this look like today? What is the status quo of how, this kind of work is done? And I think that can also, further help illustrate where the opportunity is for Ingine.
Today, you have a lot of very brilliant individuals who are attacking this problem from a lot of different angles. And, you're just getting quantities of genomic information at scale that can be analyzed. You're just able to really bring in even the clinical information that maybe would be benefiting or adding value, again, at scale. But you've got a lot of people, and maybe I'll use this analogy again, they're out in the woods and they're each wandering around, or there's a lot of wandering around doing and using different capabilities. So some are exploring, hey, these powerful neural nets that we've seen so much about, let's apply them. Let's take that deep learning and find out what we can. Lately, people are thinking, well, why can't we use these GPTs to analyze this? And we're going to build GPTs specific to life sciences and genomics, and we're gonna let them tell us where to develop solutions. So there's a lot of kind of random discovery going on, or people are using, there's a lot of old tools that people still rely on, and to some success. What we're trying to do is say there's another way that we can bring all of this together, and that is using this advanced math that others maybe haven't really fully applied to this sector. And we need to prove the capabilities. And that's what we've started to do. Some of the proof of concepts we've started to undertake. But we also, at the same time, want to bring in some voices to work with us. We want to bring in some folks who have that big picture and are trying to address these challenges at a very high level. We want to bring them in so that we can work with them and start to gain that respect and that gravitas that others rely on to break through.
As you demonstrate what you could call maybe the efficacy of your approach in this, how do you layer on, Ingine as a business, and how you've thought about, the organization and what does the company look like?
Yeah. So right now we're a small shop. It's the core three of us. We've had some outside programmers who have worked with us over the course of time. And we have a series of advisors who we work with as well. We're always looking, maybe there's some more advisors we want to bring in. We initially thought about this as a direct to market. We're going to bring the solution to the hospital. We're going to charge them, as a software as a service. We'll figure out some per model, per whatever. We kind of rethought a little bit of that. We want to work with channel partners. So the industry has a lot of big players, and they have a lot of bandwidth, and we'd like to add value to what they're doing. We don't want to recreate everything and try to recreate the wheel ourselves. We'd like to work with some channel partners. At the same time, there are things that we can solve directly. And so we will still explore and look at those opportunities where we could go direct, and again, as a software as a service. But more likely than not, we're going to work with some channel partners and have them incorporate the technology into their offerings, and then that will help spread this. At the core of this, Barry really wants to see this technology made available because he believes it will help solve some of medicine's biggest problems. And so he wants this to be out there. And so, my my goal and responsibility is to make sure that that happens one way or another.
What are you most excited about looking forward?
Well, it's interesting. This is, it's always a little bit of a roller coaster. So, I get excited when I get up on the top of a hill because I finally see the capabilities and the vision of where this can go. And then sometimes, you ride back down and you get in the trough because things start clouding you and you start hearing about others maybe, launching a new product that maybe they say is better than what you're doing. And it can become a little disillusional. But I think really it excites me when I get back up to the top and Barry helps, and Srinidhi helped me get back up there. And you really do understand this really is something that's unique and novel. And to date, any of the stumbling blocks put in front of us, we've really been able to conquer and show that they're not really stumbling blocks. They're things that people want to present to us or tell us you guys can't do, or this is something else is better. And really, every time we've hit that bump, we've been able to get over it and show not really, that's not the case. So it's exciting in that regard. It's exciting to learn at the feet of these two gentlemen who really have just great technical skills and a great understanding of the challenges that are really at the core of some of the problems we have in healthcare and life sciences and in medicine. And so it excites me to be able to really try to figure out a way to then translate that excitement that they have, that knowledge that they have, and help to move it forward. And I hope I'm able to do that. I'm always looking for other partners who can fill in the gaps with me. And we think we've got some good advisors who are helping us with that. But I know that it's going to take more because this is a very challenging field. The technical challenges that others are throwing in front of us, are hard to deal with. I think we're starting to see more light in the sense that existing AI technologies, people are finally really taking a deeper dive into them and understanding the limitations and what they really are capable of doing. So no longer are people starting to, they're still doing it, but they're not running around worried that the AI robots are going to take over the world. They're realizing that, look, I still can't get a self-driving car that really works. And it's been a couple of decades and lots of billions of dollars thrown at that. So, maybe we should not take it, at face value, what people are telling us about those technologies, and let's dig deeper and let's find some that maybe do work better. And I think that's where we are.
I do feel it is lost a bit that there are all these alternative approaches at the moment that have, merits of their own, as, the blanket AI has, kind of demonstrated, or at least captured the attention of pretty much everyone.
Oh, look, they're really very cool. They're great. They're great. I mean, it's fun playing with ChatGPT, and it's fun to ask it questions and be amazed at how it answers them. Or it's fun to think about the ability of some of these neural nets and the types of classification they can do. They can identify a face out of a crowd of 20,000. They can do that. But you really have to be careful about understanding what that really is doing and how that really gets applied to some of the more complex problems that are still out there and what limitations you get. So a recent analysis was looking at, how good are these GPTs, these transformers, in doing math? And they said, hey, you give it any 4 digits times 4 digits, it'll solve it. And people are like, wow, that's amazing. I can't do that with it. But then again, a handheld calculator does that. Now, you can take a handheld calculator and do 12 digits by 12 digits. Well, you know what? ChatGPT and others, they can't. They have limitations, and we just haven't really explored them and understood them or been willing to understand what those limitations are. So I think we really need to, step back and take a hard look. Now, it's not easy to convince people that they have to do that, and that's unfortunately where maybe we are, to try to get them to understand what our capabilities are and how we are different and how we do deliver more value. But that's what our challenge is, and that's what we're gonna really try to do.
What has it meant to be on this roller coaster, as you described it, in Cleveland? What has been the role and importance of Cleveland in this journey?
So I spent a good part of my career, 14 years, working at BioEnterprise, working with startups, working with our entrepreneurial community and our venture community. And I will say Cleveland itself is sort of a little bit of a microcosm of a roller coaster. I think deep down, we understand what we need to do. And at times we do kind of peak and hit a top of a hill, but then we always seem to fall back into a trough. And I think it's a challenge for us to get out of that trough. And I love Cleveland. I moved back here from New York City because I wanted to live here in Cleveland. I think we have incredible promise and incredible upside. I think we just haven't really gotten together as a community properly to really undertake what's necessary to do to get there. I will continue to fight for Cleveland. Our goal is to grow the company here in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. That may be a challenge. We may not be able to do that, but that's the goal. That's why I agreed to step in and work with these two gentlemen. And I said to them, look, one of the caveats is we will try to grow this here in Cleveland. And you have to understand, my two partners are in India and England. So, they kind of have their own druthers. But, Cleveland is got tremendous potential. I just don't want it to always have tremendous potential. I want it to show that it can be successful as well. And so I'd like to, use this as a stepping stone to help do that. But I think we're going to need a lot more outside of just one success to really, change the tide here.
What does success look like and mean to you?
Again, getting back to kind of wanting to make sure that Barry's findings and his brilliance and what he's built, making sure that sees the light of day and gets into the market and starts making a difference. It's not growing a $1 billion company. I mean, hopefully that would be the outcome of being successful for Barry, but it may be something where, we don't really have a company. We just make sure that the technology gets out there and sees the light of day and makes a difference in the world. Because really, at the end of the day, we've got 7-8 billion people living on this planet. We've got a lot of problems to deal with. And the success of one company, it's great and it would be very impactful, but it's not going to be the same thing as if you can really change the trajectory of medicine and make an impact for large numbers of people. And that's what Barry wants to be able to do and bring with his technology. And so that's part of what drives me in terms of my focus and efforts here.
This is kind of a broader, question than specifically to the work you're doing and kind of the research and progress Barry has made. But how many good ideas do you feel are out there that don't have the translator? In my mind, you're kind of like a translator of sorts of this academic world and, the real world implications of that work being done. How have you thought about that kind of space?
I think early on, I was probably naive to that. And I thought, well, every great technology automatically moves forward and is brought out. I mean, why wouldn't it be? I mean, it just makes sense. And I think as I experienced more and learned more and saw more things and in different fields, not necessarily in the life sciences or healthcare, but in other fields, you realize, it's kind of a standard story out there that there's advances in better technology that don't see the light of day or don't succeed or are purposefully, held back. And it kind of makes you wonder why. But it's the reality of the world that we live in. Now, maybe it's the result of a system that needs to move forward by not necessarily, advancing the best technology. Maybe it's the result of just, people not being fully educated or having that translator. I don't know, but I've seen it elsewhere. And, it's interesting to see it. It really is enlightening to try to learn from it. And, I think that is probably the one key difference between maybe a 20-year-old entrepreneur and an older entrepreneur is that maybe you've seen more and maybe you can actually understand more of what's going on. Now, sometimes that's a negative. That 20-year-old who doesn't know that something might not work, they're going to plow forward. And we've seen a lot of great things happen because of that. But at the same time, I think, the education you get over the years can be beneficial because it can bring to light some of these things that you just were too naive to understand early on.
What would you say have been some of your other biggest learnings in this journey?
I think the other learnings, part of it is just understanding the challenge of bringing change or having change inside of an organization. I mentioned I worked at large organizations early on, one of which was keenly focused on, and the executive leadership was keenly focused on the importance of change. The CEO used to say, if it ain't broke, fix it. And that organization today, even 35 years later, is a very successful organization. They've had their battles, but they're a very successful organization still. The other one has done nothing but sort of pare itself back and shrink over time because they were they bought in too much to their existing business model and their greatness, and they did not change. So, I think that's part of it, is that, kind of that ability to understand change and the necessity and how you attack it. That's probably the biggest one I would say.
Yeah. What do you feel is kind of unsaid in this, story of, both your own professional career and of the work you're doing with Ingine that we haven't talked about?
Well, I'll look and say for the region, what's unsaid is that if we really want to succeed better as a region, we need to start doing more. We were doing that for a while, and then we started kind of falling back. And I think if we want to succeed as a region, we really need to understand and start to undertake some of those things that will propel the region forward more directly and more impactfully. For myself with Ingine, I think it's taken us a long time to try to clarify the story. We're still wrestling with it. We still have documents that are too convoluted and too confusing. It's still hard to go beyond, better knowledge equals better medicine, because people then want to say, well, what does that mean? And then you start getting into the details. So, for me, it's probably doing a better job with some of that. And then, lastly, I don't know, it's just, these personal journeys are hard, and you really have to maybe take a step back every now and then and reposition yourself or rebalance, rethink what you're doing, and make sure that you're comfortable with what's going on and where it's going. And we've had a couple of those moments within the organization, and we may have one of those in a couple of months if some of these things that we're working on right now don't, move forward. And so you have to constantly be doing that.
Mm. Yeah, it is certainly a journey. Well, and the forest and trees analogy just, I think, kind of rings true through all of it. You want to constantly make sure, are we going in the right direction?
Yeah, and every time you get to a clearing and you think you see where you're heading, maybe you don't realize you're in another forest, or you're in a deeper forest, and it's hard. It's hard until you've gotten past that point to maybe understand what's going on. That's why it's important to maybe have some good advisors along the way. It's important to have a diversity of opinion on a team. You can't all, believe that everything is perfect and what you're all doing is exactly right, because there's a chance it's not. And if someone's not asking those hard questions, you could get too far in before you realize that you're on the wrong path.
Hmm. Well, I appreciate, Jim, your, in the spirit of Feynman, taking us through what is, complicated math and in application to the company you're building, and that you're building it here in Cleveland. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But you'll notice I really didn't get into the math too directly. Yeah. And that was, that's on purpose.
Like the microwave,
Right.
Well, I'll close it out with our traditional closing question then, which is for a hidden gem in Cleveland, for something that other folks may not know about, but perhaps they should.
So up until about a month ago, my favorite hidden gem in Cleveland was the parking lot under the I-90 bridge just outside of Progressive Field. And it was the best place to park your car. You could always find a spot. It was a short walk into the park, cheapest parking rate around, until last week when I tried to get in there and I found several thousand other people had found that hidden gem, and it was no longer accessible even an hour before game time. So my new hidden gem is actually not a single location. there's a bike ride that some people here on the East Side have developed called the Post-Industrial Ride. And it starts here in Shaker, but you can start anywhere on the East Side, really. It takes you through the metro parks. You go through the valley. You come up through the industrial section of Cleveland. You bike past the steel mill. You get to Tremont. You get into the downtown area. You then go along the waterfront. You come back up through MLK and up through University Circle, and then you're back out in the suburbs. And it's amazing that in a single bike ride, you can see that diversity and you can experience all aspects of Cleveland, and they're all incredible. And if you've done the ride enough over the years, you can see the changes and the growth in Tremont. You can see how an industrial section has been converted to kind of an open area that was nothing there. And now it's a ballpark for kids. You go along the waterfront and you see the potential and the possibility. And then when you come back up through MLK, you see the beauty that probably a lot of people in town don't realize exists right in the heart, of University Circle and in Cleveland. So to me, that's a hidden gem. And I wish more people had a chance to really experience that. Now, unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do it unless you're on a bicycle. But it's a tremendous route, and I would really recommend anyone who's got the ability to do that, take that route once and really keep your eyes open, and you will see the beauty and the incredible opportunity and promise that Cleveland holds.
Well said. Well, Jim, I just want to thank you again. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Jeffrey, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
If people had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, what would be the best way for them to do so?
You can find me at J, the initial J, and then Weisman, Weisman, at Ingine.com, Ingine.com. Reach out to me anytime. The links should be on our website, Ingine.com. You can find me if you want to grab my Gmail. I don't know if this will be put into the podcast at anywhere, but for a link, just reach out to me.
Yeah, well, we'll make it happen. Cool.
Okay.
Well, thank you again.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.